Hello, Gravitrons. I had more gravity. Let's play chess. right, guys, I'll be back in a minute. Okay. I'm gonna review this game. I had the black pieces, king's pawn, Scotch opening, and all this is booked to put the bishop on c5. Knight's already pressuring the knight. My knight's pressuring his or they knight. The bishop as well. So right now it's 2-1 in terms of pressure. The best thing for white to do is what my opponent did: add another level of protection while developing a piece. Queen h4 maybe was a little bit premature. I do pick up this pawn in most scenarios. I'll pick up the e4 pawn. The other threat is knight takes d4. Bishop takes d4. Queen takes e4 check. Bishop back to e3. I think we're going to gain a pawn with bishop takes e3, f takes e3, queen takes e3 check, probably blocking with the queen just to keep things sane, though a block with the bishop is also reasonable. Blocking with the queen, and black trades queens on e2, and after bishop takes e2, black has an extra pawn, and the move. This is progress for black. You know, we search to find equality out of the opening. This here is better than equality for black. But c3 does mostly what it intends. Torch has it as some kind of as a mistake here, but it does what it intends. It solidifies the knight on d4. Queen takes e4 mostly for the pawn. To be honest, I'm just grabbing a pawn there. Then back to h4. I don't know. My queen might be a little bit vulnerable on h4. The move like knight at 2 to f3 looks strong here for white as I place my queen on h4. Nonetheless, so my opponent played that, and it looks like it's some kind of miss. I'm right now this review I'm gonna not go over the misses, mostly because I'm trying to review this particular game without Torch 4, without the analysis. I'm gonna review this game in game review. Knight f3 and queen to e6 is good. The queen's reasonably safe here, even on the open e-file. There's pieces in the way. The king's on the opposite side, not my opponent's rook or anything. So we just have to make haste to get our knight to f6 and then castle, and the queen will be able to handle. If there's a discovered attack after that, it's unlikely, but the queen will be able to handle it as long as she's not standing directly in front of her king. Bishop to e2, knight takes d4. So accurate moves. d5 because I don't want to go too long without developing my minor pieces. Also because knight f6 is fine. Castle's kingside is fine. Bishop f3 is good. I like that. That's a strong move for white. And bishop to e6 I think is a strong move here for black. It's listed as an inaccuracy, but this is a strong way to protect against a lot of different attacks. It protects the open e-file. It protects the diagonal g8 to a2 for either of the two pieces that might occupy that diagonal as a diagonal, not counting the pawns making it to f7 and then beyond the diagonal. That's just plain silly. Bishop e6 is just very solid anchoring move with a pawn in our coffers. A pawn ahead in our coffers. Coffers, like bank or piggy bank, pocketbook, wallet, purse, clutch, in our coffers, to our name even, in our account. It's a good word though. I'm pushing the knight around with c6 while also buttressing the strong point on d5. I played pawn to c6. Somehow I had a better move. Okay, I can live with that for now. Bishop takes c5, queen takes c5, and that knight has to find a place to attack or get the heck out of there. He finds a good place for an attack. This is a strong move here by white. Some players would look at this relationship between the queen and the pawn and the knight and say, let's get the heck out of here so I don't lose my knight. But examining the aggressive option, sometimes first, but examining the aggressive option is important here because it's a freebie. Attacking the rook at a8, at very least, before even calculation really, attacking the rook at a8 means that if the rook moves to save himself, the knight can still capture on e6. And I'm forced to capture back with the pawn, and now into calculation, but just barely. I'm forced to capture back with the pawn, and rook takes e6 gives white a pawn, levels the material, levels the amount of material on the board. So knight c7, hitting at the rook on a8 and sort of challenging that knight and resigning myself to the fact of this position with black to move. All that probably goes back, I think all that goes back to c6. This is all more or less forced since c6. So I think that's why c6 is considered a bad move here by Torch. Torch sees this already. I don't know if I had quite calculated this position to that depth. In a tournament, that's about the depth that I work at, but in a blitz game, I'm not going to normally calculate quite. Sometimes I will. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm saying things I shouldn't, but about how deep I search in tournaments and stuff. Pawn takes e6, rook takes e6. Now here's an interesting position with black to move. Material's even. This is like a really even board. What's the main thing that pops out? Yes, I know that black's king is a little bit loose. Black's queen is more aggressive, and white's queen is probably a little bit better overall because of the battery she forms with the bishop at f3. White has an aggressive rook that can be backed up with the same move and then make a triple on the e-file. So I would say white's a little bit better here, a little bit better, because some of these things don't come to fruition quite that easily. But what's the main thing? So there's two main things I'm looking at. One is that white might stand a little bit better. One is that white might stand a little bit better. Two is that this board is dry. I mean, you talk about a dry 18th or 18th move here, 19th move. You talk about a dry chessboard into the 19th move, right? You're looking to squeeze a little tiny advantage out of a mostly even board. There's been trades. This is not complicated. This is not particularly wild or tactical, and not the way we normally think of complicated. It is complicated because you have to decide, well, what the heck to play then? I chose knight to e4, so a little bit on the side of forcing complications. The main idea is I want to put my knight on a powerful outpost, and I'm also going to do so while cutting off the communication between white's rook at e6 and the back rank, and any ways that these pieces might find themselves onto the back rank to double on the e file. I can't have that. Or if it is going to happen, at least going to happen at the cost of a long-range piece for a knight in a soon-to-be endgame that will favor somewhat long-range pieces. Not only that, but bishop takes f3 is tempting for white to play, where black can respond. Queen takes f2 check. That's what happened, so I went through with it. I'm now in a better position. We just look for some small advantage here. The main thing on black's 18th move, I think I did well to cut the rook off from his communications to his other team members, his other active team members. And good came of it. Queen takes f2 check into the corner, capturing the bishop. The pawn goes. Then the b2 pawn goes. Black is a pawn ahead. You look at this board and say, black is a pawn ahead, or perhaps more. There's no check on d5 because of the pawn. There's no check on b3 because of the queen will actually lay herself out against the against her opponent's queen at that point. And black will be ahead a pawn in a otherwise even board. And then pawn islands. You get 1, 2, 3 pawn islands. First 2, mostly by nature of which pawn is missing, and it's this pawn that black has extra. So this is all going back to knight to e4 and destroying the communications between this rook and his base. And this is what this board is the result of that. Cost the good move knight to e4 cost white to the point where white now has to deal with this board. Rook e2. Rook e2 was a bad move. Capture the pawn now. Black has 2 pawns for the better. I'll stack on the f file. Here, for a second, I thought I missed something. I might have gone to the corner on h8. It keeps an important threat. This threat of checkmate. Queen f1 check. Rook takes queen. Or rook takes f1 check. Rook takes f1 checkmate. On the other hand, this endangers my own king just a bit, just a little amount. This endangers my own king for back rank issues, himself. So I didn't like that. And I didn't like that just banking on white to be unable to see this checkmating threat. I thought white would find that. If I play king h8 here, we can expect moves like rook to e1, queen to d1, queen to b1. Maybe even rook to g1. And then at some point playing h3 to hammer it home. But there's so many great options that so long as white realizes this checkmate threat, my experience is that will be dealt with. At whatever kind of level I'm playing chess, that threat will be noticed and dealt with. So instead I played queen to f7, a little bit still wondering if I could have snuck a win here on f1, and especially because of how few seconds I have left on the clock. So I'm making my moves quicker here. Trade queens came as a surprise, a welcome surprise. I play rook takes f7. Then after, if I double, first of all, the rook's covering the 7th rank. The only pawn off the 7th rank is covered anyway. Plus, I can gain a tempo of initiative by playing rook to f8. White will have to do something about the mate threat on f1. Alright? The mate threat's still there. Has to be accommodated for, and h3 is a darn good way to do it. I think probably computers are going to prefer king to g1 because no, not that. I had that wrong. H3 is the way to do it. My opponent found the right move, but I'm still getting in a trade of rooks while I'm up 2 pawns. This trade of rooks, I'm making some of these moves. Some of the moves, for instance, why not take back with the king? Well, for one part, it gives your opponent some checks, and that's not all that great. We take back with the rook, and then double rooks. If these pawns stay where they are, and some things have to stay where they are, but then there's the move on f1, rook to f1 check, forces, by the rules of chess, a trade of rooks at this board. By this board, it doesn't force it by the... it does, yeah. Black can still force it. With here, there's a forced trade of rooks. Either my opponent initiates, or if my opponent chooses instead to escape, the king is slightly more active here because of the g3 square, then I initiate a trade of rooks, and black is in a single rook and pawn endgame ahead 2 pawns. That's good. I'm usually doing very well with those. If I have 2 pawns to the extra, no problem. So these moves, somewhat under time pressure. I think both my opponent and I made some mistakes. Moving the c5 pawn was not... What did I do? I had him on c6. If I play pawn to a5, I don't know. I actually think this was the right move. I'm going to move the c pawn, keep protecting the a pawn, and I'm going to move the c pawn as advanced as he can get, as advanced as she or they can get. And it's sort of an entente, or not an entente, an impasse. This is a kind of a standoff. The rook is attacking both pawns. My rook is defending both pawns. These guys are somewhat, they're doing their dance. So it's time to shift our focus onto the king side, and exactly how does black want to advance? Well, pawn to h6 is good. Some kind of flag here from torch 4. Maybe pawn to a6 was better, then try to play rook to b5 and push the pawn to a5, where now the rook is protecting both pawns in a more, closer way, among other things. I'm not sure. Let's all right. So about this mistake, my coach says that position was critical, but you didn't spend much time. This was probably a pre-move. I was making moves at 20 seconds on my clock. I had noticed at this point that it was time to race. My enemy is low on my enemy. This is harsh. My opponent is low on time, as am I. So some of these moves are just sort of blitzed out real quickly. I caught him in some sort of chain where he was unable to break my system of pre-moves. So that's online blitz chess. There's no doubt about that. But I would have wondered here with black to move, what's a better move for black? I like g5 because it helps restrict my opponent's king and their lines where white's rook moves to the d file or the e file, and then I get to, this discovered protection of the g5 pawn. Just a little bit more in black's favor than otherwise. But I'm actually gonna, so g5, and I'm looking at the torch is gonna crush me. Huh. That wasn't so bad. Um, anyway, in the game itself, we just ran out of time. I spent less time, so I won that game. All right. I played a number of games in a club tournament yesterday. Played 26 games yesterday. Okay, yeah, this was a good game, a good contested game. Okay. This is the Danish Gambit, the normal form of the Danish Gambit. Some open games are kind of tough to review, to be honest. But here I played the move b6 and didn't see the response bishop d5. It's an excellent threat. It just almost works. And I was glad that I looked long enough to find a way to shimmy out as black here with queen to c5 check. White has no way to deal with the check that stops black from saving his rook on the next move. Some of these move saves would be silly, like here on the A file, you wouldn't do that. But rook to b8 is going to save black at least probably a full rook. At least the exchange, probably a full rook. You know what? Instead of rook to b8, I pushed the issue with pawn to c6, which was seen here as an inaccuracy. It's also not the end of the world in this game, as the bishop moves back, and white's gonna try to black's gonna try to catch white in a trap on the a6 f1 diagonal. Here it is. Bishop to a6. The queen can stay in protection of her bishop, but why? Now the bishop is attacking, wall protected, both the rook and the queen, and that was it. Did well tactically in the middle game, and my opponent resigned when, in a respectful and timely way. I'm glad I found the tactic, and it was a good game. All right. Thank you all for watching. Thank you, Gravitrons. I'm more gravity. Have a great night.